Welcome back, fellow soldiers, to this week's Developers Briefing, and that is Developers Briefing number 88 with the topic, and I'm very excited that this finally gets addressed by the devs and shared with us. The topic is bullet penetration and the future implementation of that feature into Hell Let Loose. But before we start and have a closer look at the developers briefing, if you enjoy the content I provide and value it, please consider subscribing and liking the video. This just shows me that you enjoy the content I provide and upload, and it'll certainly support me in summarizing and working on those developers briefings. But now let's have a closer look at what Max, the lead developer, is having in petto for us, and I think I'm gonna let him open this developers briefing with what he is writing to us. When approaching bullet penetration systems, we thought hard about what would make the difference to Hell Let Loose. Hell Let Loose is a huge game in scale, and a feature like bullet penetration, if made too complex or obscure, may make little to no noticeable difference to players. We also felt that making the system too obvious and powerful would create very cheesy gameplay, with players being shot through solid surfaces and nowhere ever feeling safe. After several brainstorming sessions, we felt that the best option would be to apply bullet penetration across the game on an individual basis, both for the object being penetrated and the type of ammunition being fired. We stepped back and looked at our netcode budget. The higher the amount of complexity, the worse it'll hold up in a 100 player conditions, and then looked at how far the system would need to stretch. As a result of this, we've created several categories, both on the material side, e.g. the wood of a wooden fence, and also on the caliber side, the weapons, ammunitions. We've built out a huge amount of materials with several different types and styles of each. Each material in the game is then given a material penetrability value. Setting this figure essentially acts as a penetration check. If the penetration power of the round is higher than the penetrability of the material, then the round will travel through the surface. So much for the first part of the look that we get at the new system that is called the bullet penetration and how it will be implemented in the game. In my opinion, this is one of the things I was waiting for the most. This is such a cool feature, but the devs are 100% right with this one. It also can destroy a game, and especially with Hell Let Loose, that is quite of a hardcore shooter, if you want to call it that, with just one shot being enough to kill you without even knowing where it came from, and then adding a bullet penetration with bullets that can just penetrate everything, that just can take away the fun of the game, especially for new players, because they are just dying all the time and don't know where that shot really came from. So the devs are aware that if they implement a bullet penetration system, it has to be specialized and specific for different environment types and the different materials that are in that environment. And if you are looking at the screen right now, the developers have also included some pictures out of the development phase where you can see how they colored different materials on the map. So you'll notice that wood is colored in another color than, for example, just a less complex material that is just laying around on the ground. That means that trees aren't that penetrable as smaller objects and smaller material, which is totally logic and makes sense. And I'm really happy that they take that approach that probably takes more work to implement, but will make the game more dynamic. If you hide behind a stone wall, less ammo will be able to penetrate than if you are hiding behind a, I don't know, dirt hill, whatever. You get my point. So I'm very happy that they take this approach and try to implement that this way into the game. But this will not be the only thing that will be specific for the bullet penetration, the material that it affects. The developers are also letting us have an insight on the ammo side, and that's what they tell us in the second part of the developers briefing, and that is that the specific ammo of a gun, so the specific caliber, also influences where that bullet is able to penetrate and how far it is able to penetrate. So that means if one bullet traveled through a stone wall, let's say, just for example, then it'll not be that powerful after this one because its velocity is now far less than it was before. And I think to show you how that will implement it, I'll let again Max take over with what he wrote about this specific case. If the round is able to travel through the surface, we are able to set up other values in the ammunition, including numbers of times the round can penetrate subsequent objects, as well as the degrading velocity of the round and the lowered resulting damage to the player hit by the round. E.g., a player who is hit by a round that has traveled through several planks of wood will take less damage than the same round that has traveled through one plank of the same wood. Finally, we now have the ability to take our specific ammunition, for example the Kar 98K Mauser, and then set its penetration power. This lets us tune each ammunition type to penetrate different materials with different levels of effectiveness. And to that, Max and the developers also added a little overview on what will be able to be penetrated by what weapon and ammunition and caliber. And I'm just gonna summarize it to you so you'll know about this one too. All weapons will be able to penetrate fabric, paper or glass, which is quite logic. Smaller rounds will be able to penetrate thin wood and plaster, and large rounds will be able to penetrate thicker wood, some bricks, and also thin metal, that is the sheet metal that is probably laying or standing around. And also here at the end of the summarization, the developers are also writing, we are currently working through the majority of props in the game and thinking carefully about what we want to enable with regards to penetration, as it's important that hardcover still feels reliable and therefore valuable to infantry players. And I also think this is the most important thing that the developers have to keep in mind also for the player base, because otherwise the game will just be unplayable if you can't really be sure what object is penetrable and what object is not. So I think they'll have some work to do with that, but it will definitely be a very good addition to the game in the future. And for everyone that is asking themselves when will this be available to play, it will be implemented with update number 8 that hasn't yet been announced with a release date, sadly, but you'll know that in update number 8 we'll get more maps and also the bullet penetration system. And once it's launched, of course, the developers will keep on working on that, keep refining it, and also listening to the community's feedback to make it better and also implement something that profits the game and also the whole community. And with that, I think I'm going to close this week's developers briefing number 88. I hope you enjoyed the content that I've provided. If you did so, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's also possible to support me outside of YouTube on my Patreon page that is linked down below in the description. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up. And also leave comments down below. I always read all the comments and try to answer all of them. As always, stay healthy, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna see each other on the battlefield.